Hello, everyone. The title of today's episode is an interesting one. It is titled An Updated Social Consciousness for Future Generations. And so, hopefully, my voice is loud enough and you can hear me. If you feel you have anything to say during this live stream, feel free to share in the chat section below. I'll respond to it. But I want to speak about society, how society is filled with conscious creatures, and how the consciousness of these creatures is being directed. And it is as if the whole species is steering itself towards a way of looking at itself, looking at the story of the world that could either be efficient or inefficient. We have to embody some sort of data, pattern of data. And pretty much I've looked at history and I've wondered what's going on overall. What is one fundamental pattern? What is the major duality that the species is oscillating between? And let me tell you why I'm thinking like this. There was this yogi by the name of Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj, this liberated man. He says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love, and in between my life moves. So he's kind of saying that his consciousness oscillates between emptiness, between being everything and nothing. So as if imagine your mind every moment, every 2 seconds has experienced emptying, being everything and being nothing, as if a part of your intelligence wants to be present as all, but a part of your intelligence is the observer of the presence, therefore it acknowledges with the empty. So the reason I'm saying this because Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, and between these two my life moves, and I'm wondering about all the human beings, what is the major duality that is kind of moving their life. Hold on, guys. Hold on a second, guys. Okay. Okay, this is much better. I had to relocate. The sun was hitting me in the eye. Therefore, we were paying attention to this kind of pattern. Now, the way I saw this pattern kind of in a bigger way, I guess, in regards to our history, is I noticed that there have been kind of civilizations, ways that our species has been present on this planet, where it has identified with the world in accordance to subjectivity first and then objectivity. First, it was just objectivity. That means everybody was an atheist. Before language, there was nothing to believe in. You can say that evolution, when it first began, was an unconscious process, was just an unconscious movement of nature. This unconscious movement of nature developed towards, after billions of years, towards a sophistication where now it can acknowledge itself, And this is what really bothers me about the modern world when I see children of the future generations kind of being pushed into cycles of stress. It's as if human beings' robotic behavior has a consequence. on the future generation's sense of being able to be free. It's as if when a person looks at their ancestors and sees that they've been making the same mistakes as them till this point, then it's kind of, you become hopeless of the past to ever reach a good future in some sense. I wondered what is very, actually before I move on, in ancient Greece, imagine me and you are walking on the street in ancient Greece. We would look at the sky and we would not just see clouds. We would see or consider there are gods walking on those clouds. When we would see the sun, we would wonder about Apollo's eyes. But nowadays in 2019, if you go tell someone, hey man, the gods are walking over clouds, they'd be like, hey man, maybe you should get some. Imagination has become too much for us to speak about, and we have hammered just like a blacksmith hammering, you know, trying to make a sword parallel to the electromagnetic field of the earth, you know, to straighten it. It's kind of like, we are hammering in a fixed reality in a changing world, and there are dangers to that. You cannot hold on to something and not expect its weight to be experienced. That is the law of attachment in some sense. Whatever you hold on to, you will have to experience it, kind of like a vehicle you're on, you know? Existence must be rekindled in your eyes with an honest story. This is the most important thing. The biggest issue with karmic flux, like when a person feels that things are not going well, is because they have not, their attention is not on the right story of their life, you know? And the story of your life, if you're a fragile person, can be changed instantly by the words of other people. If you're not fragile, it will have to change by your own experience. So you see, it's a strength that people are not considering, because we have given the dependence to the other. So let's say thousands of years ago, they thought the world was a spiritual place, you know, and then now they think it's a non-spiritual place. So spirituality has moved in the subconscious and unconscious of people, in the subconscious minds of people. And back in the day, it was the opposite. What I'm trying to say is, every generation we just switch back and forth. We're jumping from stone to stone, trying to get across this river of time, not realizing we are identifying with each stone we're jumping on. You know, I sometimes ask myself playful questions that make me laugh. Like, I ask myself questions that make me laugh. And one of those is like, what if the whole civilization, what if every creature on this planet has it wrong? You know? And usually at that point, if that's true, you have to laugh. You have no choice. Because that means the eyes of the collective are not open to a certain phenomena that the eyes of the individual is. Whenever this occurs, this creates a burden on the individual. I'll tell you an example of this in a story. There's this dervish story, one of the best stories I've ever heard. And in this story, there are these three friends, you know? These three men who are walking by the edge of their town, and strangely, they've noticed a giant wall appear out of nowhere. You know, imagine you kind of go out, you know, to the edge of your town expecting just like forested areas, and you suddenly see this giant wall, you know? And so these friends are walking and they're like, whoa, where'd this giant wall come from? You know, and suddenly one of them notices a ladder in the distance and he runs to the ladder and he's like, guys, we found a ladder. I'm going up to see what's on the other side. And he goes up and the two friends sit down, wait down there to see what the guy sees. And the guy goes up the ladder, you know, and it's a steep angle, but still the guy makes it. The first friend makes it up without a set, without a single, his head turning around, with saying anything to his two friends down. The guy just jumps in. He sees something on the other side. He just quickly jumps in. Now, the second friend looks at the third friend. It's like, whoa, where'd that guy go? Let me go check it out. And he goes up. And he goes up the ladder and he gets to the top. And again, something, he sees what the first friend saw and he understands why the first friend jumped in. He sees the Garden of Paradise. He sees a heavenly dimension. He sees heaven pretty much. So the first friend went up this wall, you know, went up this ladder to this wall, and he just saw heaven, and he's like, as if the mission of his life was over, and he just jumped in, you know. Now, the second friend, before jumping in, he's like, maybe I should tell the third friend what's going on. And he looks at the third friend, you know, he has certain level of care for his species still. He looks at the third friend and says, hey man, the Garden of Paradise is up here. The first friend jumped in and I'm gonna jump in too. Later, bro. And he jumps into heaven. He gets into paradise. Garden of Paradise is on the other side of the wall. Now, the third friend is shocked. He's like, what is this? And he goes up the ladder, and his eyes too fall upon the Garden of Paradise. And there is a moment where, for this third friend, his conscience, his intuition, everything is telling him, jump, jump, your lifetime is complete, jump. And instead, this third friend says something which is pretty much the moral of the story. He looks at the Garden of Paradise, and like the other friends, he says, oh my God, the Garden of Paradise. And before he jumps in, he says, the Garden of Paradise is here. I must let the world know. He climbs back down. He climbs back down. You see, that is when you have found the spirit of your species. You're not just roaming as some bewildered creature enslaved to desire and fear for the rest of your life. So you see, it was as if we require in order to update the consciousness of the future generations, to scope around and see what are the efficient technologies that have taken us closer to building paradise on Earth. And we amplified, and this doesn't mean a technological paradise. And all technologies are not external. Language is an inner technology. Mr.Within considers it like that, but I think everybody in the world doesn't. But I consider it as a technology. What that means is, just because I drive a car to work, it doesn't mean I'm the car when I'm driving it. Just because I use language to communicate doesn't mean I am the language. This is why I'm making this huge emphasis to people that you are not a thought. You can never be. You are the generator of thought, a biological generator of thought for now, as we consider. In regards to the subjective sophistication of the moment, that has to have a proper approach. Its proper approach has not been explained well. Let me tell you why. Because most approaches towards the divine require the dismantling of the individualistic idea. That means there is no, this is going to be hilarious, but no person has ever gotten enlightened, because the moment it occurs, you are not a person. It's a presence thing. It has to do with the presence of the space before even thoughts emerge. It has to do with your earliest memories before you learned language, and it was just the rawness of experience. The mind of the child first becomes the world. And so you might not believe this, but the child is being the world at first. The mind is, every child's intelligence, of course, is different, but they mimic the world. It's like copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Like the young child is like its mind is like that. Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And like the Transformers scene where that car saw a better car, and just like Bumblebee, the car transformed, like it made itself into a better version of the car. So similarly, it's like that. We are constantly updating ourselves based on patterns. These patterns, some of them arrive to us naturally. Some of them are enforced on us. Some of them we never had a chance to wonder about because it was the first wave of data that hit the person. And believe it or not, it's a beautiful thing, because we think of ourselves as too advanced. This is why we're suffering. We are suffering because we see the future. That is, if you go and see a person suffering, most people are suffering because of what will happen, not because of what is happening. Okay? Their suffering is not in the present moment. Their suffering is segmented into a projection of space and time that linearly goes from A to B to C to D. They have not still experienced A, B, C, D all being one point. When that occurs, a strange peace arrives, and at the same time you're visited by the spirit of the cosmos. When I say you're visited by the spirit of the cosmos, I mean you experience your mind beyond the attributes that have defined it for so long. So the whole point of these stories, and what I'm trying to bring the audience's attention to, is that we were the future generations of our ancestors. And there will be children who will be born after us. Now, because we're temporary beings, realistically, what seems to be the most efficient thing that a temporary being can do is to build something that will contribute to the eyes of the future generations. You see, it's as if it's like there's this, oh man, I gotta read this. Khalil Gibran, this, I believe, Lebanese mystic and poet, one of the most incredible poets. He has this quote where he's telling it to parents, and he's just literally, it's his poetic vision, a mystical vision on pretty much the children of the world and just the future generations and how the older generations must see it. And it's this long poem, or I'm gonna read it because it's badass. Okay. All right. Let's see. Where is this thing? Khalil Gibran, a person who was alive from 1883 to 1931. His most notable work is The Prophet, and he was born in Bishari, Lebanon. Oh, yeah. He says, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children are, as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrow may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. And what he means, Khalil Gibran here, he means that we have to be the bow for the future generations, which are an arrow where their direction is pointed to infinity, and we are just giving them momentum. So the efficiency of all human beings alive now is going to be how well the bow, how far the bow was pushed back for the future generations, advancement of the civilization. There are very beautiful poetic structures in our history, and I don't know which poet said this, but the concept comes to my mind, the image, but I can't remember who it was that said it. Definitely an incredible philosophical mindset. It pretty much, the idea was this, that it's a letter from the past to the future, to the future generations. A letter from the past to the future generations. In this letter, it's as if the past is saying to the future, "O future generations, we will live for you, and we will give our lives for you, because you will bring us back, because you will be the eternity of the lives of our eyes." Of course, the way the thing was said wasn't like that. It was pretty much just the idea that the future, the past is telling the future, we will live for you in order for you guys to live for us, kind of meaning that we will experience the temporary life until from the future, it's like there's an awareness to the eternal life. Pretty much as if, imagine the future generations could bring back all those people who died in the past somehow. The technology evolved to that point. And to be honest, I think it's the coolest thing, the most exciting thing you can do. Most people, the exciting things they do, it's only exciting for them. You know, they do it, and they enjoy their individual reward for this lifetime. All those people trying to get work for all any person who works hard throughout the day believes in heaven. So I find that if we really look at it, if let's say we had an aerial view of that dove after the first day after world peace, let's say there was world peace and the first day after. What I'm trying to say, if we could observe the human species from a distance, what we would find is that pretty much people, if you looked at their whole day, it's as if they're going through various programs that are motivated by their subjective realm. So people's decisions is coming out of the combination of their emotions, which it has to do with the speed of their thoughts, which has to do with their imagination. So you see, at first I thought I was creating thoughts, right? And you can create thoughts as a being, but it takes energy. So the way is, some people, they generate thoughts, some people receive thoughts. Now the difference is, it's both new for the experience of the being. That means both types of thoughts are new. They have the same novelty value, but they arrive differently. One arrives from resistance, the other arrives from non-resistance. Pretty much when you are non-resistant to the flows of reality, what happens is you get access to the environment's intelligence. But if you're resisting something, and really nowadays everybody subjectively resists the world because they expect it to be a certain way, so they never are content with how the world actually is. Excuse me. I thought about this for a while, and I wondered, okay, so if my day is a program, let's wonder about the evolution of being able to plan for the future. Let's just think right now we could plan for the future in such an incredible way that it's as if, like, literally you woke up and you didn't have to think anymore. You had everything planned out and you were doing it step by step. You see, a person who plans too much in a changing world starts becoming a machine. It doesn't mean you become inefficient. It just means you live mechanically. You live in accordance to repetition of a cycle. So the cycle of karma occurs because the idea of the person has to constantly keep the what its attention is on, that's making the idea real, active. You have to constantly, it's as if, it's funny, it's like people are trying to get out of the cycle of karma, but the idea of them that wants to get out of a cycle of karma can never get out, because that idea cyclically is being kept. Like when you sleep, you have no philosophies. Have you noticed? Nobody is a philosopher in deep sleep. Even the greatest philosophers, none of them had an idea. They were like, okay, it's like pitch blank, It's like this blank absence of consciousness. Now that's for different talks in regards to how the person can maneuver their waking state, and how really consciousness alters. You might not believe this, but anytime you eat food, anytime you drink, anytime you move, your consciousness alters, because data is being received in new ways. Okay? So this is the unique thing. Kind of the mystical quest for some people, it doesn't begin with an excitement of, yo, I want to get to heaven, man. Like, it doesn't work. It's not a heavenly driven. Heaven is an effect of a remembrance of a cause. Freedom is an effect of a cause that is known. So you see, the issue is, most of us feel we know things, but we feel we don't know everything. So our life becomes driven by knowledge. Even we have prophets who have said, know thyself. Every yogi in this pretty much has said, study yourself. Pretty much all the mystics have said this. But what self are we studying when the self comes from the world? You see, the self of yours that you are taking ownership as a free will is actually a part of the world. This is why Khalil Gibran in his poetry says, your children are not your children. He says you can house their bodies, but not their souls that belong to tomorrow. So this is a very important point, that our species has been acknowledging and measuring progress in accordance to referential objective change, but it has not cared for the subjective atmospheres behind people's eyes, because it has considered it void. As if, like, imagine like a friend of yours comes and talks to you, but you for example have forgotten who this person is, right? Do you see? It's as if that it's like the friend has a reality, but your reality is not that reality. So you are in some sense lost in a room that the reality cannot exist in. This is an inner sort of cruelty, that arises in the human being. Of course, it is said to err is to be human. That means making mistakes is not it's common. It's like you cannot expect people to be perfect people, or you'd be expecting robots, you know. Our imperfections are kind of like what really keep us, give our imagination a freedom. Your mistakes are feedback, pretty much, for your next moment. It's very fascinating when you treat life as a moment of being rather than a sort of ideological fixation, or enlightenment or freedom is the wind. I'm not joking. The wind has no shape, but it has direction. Our consciousness seems to have no attribute, but it is moving. Now, in order to change, let's make a playful story. Let's say that there were parallel dimensions to this earth. I'm saying this very playfully in a scientific hypothetical way. Imagine there was a parallel dimension of earth, and a group of human beings from this parallel dimension. In my science fiction novel, there's stories like this. But anyways, imagine from one parallel dimension you travel and go to another parallel dimension. We go to that parallel dimension and we see the civilization has been prevented and slowed down because of extreme ideological worship. When I say worship, the word worship, it soon follows with warships. You cannot claim an idea as truth and do not expect the world to change it. You see, this is why war begins. War always begins in the minds of men, because those men, if they lose that idea, they feel they lose their power. If they think they are wrong, they will feel non-existent to their future expectation of themselves. This is why cruelty and greed exists. This is why it's easy to kind of walk past those who require a helping hand. It's because we fail to acknowledge them as human when they stop living to the mainstream human standard. This is what I understood when I like in 2016, I went back to Iran, and what happens is we drove like hours north from the capital, Tehran, to go to, my grandparents' cottage and whatnot. And I remember when we went there, it was like I saw sort of villagers. I saw village people, And of course in Iran, the thing is, people have a main house in the capital and then they have a cottage outside, right? So when I went to that cottage, the cottage was in a village environment that wasn't disturbed. So it was very natural, like environment, But I saw how villagers were living. And I had seen it, of course, in my childhood too, in many countries. But I saw the difference, and the difference was the simplicity of living has not brought them the burden the burden of knowledge has not fallen on them. It's as if unless you're a person who knows what the world's problems are, I don't feel you are a human. No, that's too far. I'll say. I don't believe you, and you have to see what's truly going on. Then you become a true human being. So that means you got to be able to, I don't want to say sacrifice, but your attention has to move away from just what you want, and you have to truly wonder about the advancement and efficiency of your civilization. We only get to do it once, and we're all just living for ourselves. How boring is that? Okay, let's imagine we made a universal kind of income system that gave the person $1 million every week. Let's say we realize money is just digits on a screen. So everybody got money, And so we'd see, okay, what then? What after the individual ultimate attainment of desire? Because let me tell you, the rich mind is not just trying to escape a lower class life. The rich mind is trying to also escape fear and have complete freedom of desire. It's as if you cannot have a desire without a follow-up of fear. They're like two sides of the same coin, because the reason you have a desire is because you fear who you will be if you don't have it. You fear your outcome. You fear the future of your existence. Conceptually, I'm speaking about this. That means conceptually the person may feel, because you can have feelings about thoughts and you can have feelings about the moment. Right now, this laptop in front of me, I'm seeing this laptop, right? And like the W key is missing, and so that gives me a certain feeling, right? And so this is for the object, for a feeling that has arisen from the objective realm due to the impact of the free will with the phenomena. Usually that impact is instantaneous. The moment I wake up my eyes, my mind has already moved. It's like there's moments even I wake up before opening my eyes. I'm just literally in the space of my body. It's as if the mind's eye is seeing things. Because you let me tell you how fascinating our intelligence is. I had a dream where in this dream I could consciously move. I wanted to go left, I would run left. I wanted to go right, I would run right. You know, I could move at a speed much more beyond than it was as if I had access to a running speed faster than like objectively possible in that dream. And so I woke up from the dream involuntarily. I just woke up from it. And I remember just sitting on the side of my bed and just wondering about the implications of what I had seen. That my body, physical body, was asleep in my bed, but my mind had simulated an individual body that experienced speed and conscious movement. So my mind simulated a world while I was sleeping in a world. So that simulation of the world was as real as how I am now. Because the moment I still remember it. In the dream, I wanted to go left. Just the intention of going left, the phenomena moved left. What that means is then I woke up and I'm like, oh my God, what does this mean? Does this mean that when I never see physical reality because the mind has sold me on the realness of the world first? And I kind of realized I wasn't the first to have this come to this. Chung Tzu, this badass Zen master, you know, one day he wakes up in this monastery above the mountains, you know, and he's there, and his disciples come and see, oh my God, our Zen master is kind of like frowning and stressed out and just like chilling and like in despair or something. They see something that they're like, oh my God, you know, the wise man of the monastery is like in stress, you know, is depressed. The enlightened guy is depressed. Shit. That's like many disciples throughout history have felt that, you know. And so what happens is that the disciples all gather around and they're like, Chung Tzu, what's up, man? What's on your mind? And Chung Tzu tells them, guys, I had a dream. I had a dream that I was a butterfly. And I woke up and I didn't know if I was a butterfly dreaming I was a Zen master, or I was a Zen master breathing I'm a butterfly, you know. And all his disciples are like, word, man, that's insane, you know. That's heavy, man, heavy, you know. And so what happens is, this is very profound. It is when a human being becomes sensitive to the subjective experiences simultaneity with the objective existence. And you will understand how able the mind is to instantaneously be phenomena. It's just doing it already. They asked this guy named Kabir, this Indian enlightened guy, they asked him, how long does it take to get enlightened, man? And he's like, a half of an instant. Pretty much he's telling him it's beyond time, man. It's all about our approach to living. And our approach to living tends to include objective data and subjective data, as Mr. Within categorizes it. I speak about the subjective evolution, which all the educational systems have. This is why I say it's as if our educational systems are not filled with lions, they're filled with sheep. Sheep are teaching lions. How much can a sheep really teach a lion? You tell me. In regards to eating grass, of course the sheep can teach you a lot. But in regards to being a lion, that means you have to challenge the unknown. That means and you go on living your life in a limited filter with a limited sky. Imagine you only saw, the sky from like the bottom of a well. You'd see it's as if there is a chaos there. It's as if there is a greater world unaccessible. It's like the heaven of the thirsty man is found in that glass of water. The heaven of the mind in suffering is found in peace. It's as if they say the one who knows his devil knows his God. And so this is like an ancient Sufi saying, And so what that means is the one who sees the design of the problem can only find a solution. The one who has not even seen what the problem is, how can you find a solution? You have to only trust the world and just send out prayers. What else can you do? For me, I have declared a war since 2014 subconsciously on language worship. Language worship is the biggest cause of inefficiency because it is a lockdown. It is literally a person is told an idea and it's as if a box is put on their head. That idea is a box on their head and they will live on with the limited intelligence that box gives them access to. You could be the greatest violinist in the world and yet your hand could never find a violin. Imagine you live a lifetime being the greatest violinist but you never touch the violin. How tragic when your intuition shouted and your ego didn't listen. The beautiful thing about life is that you cannot be king. This is the best thing. This frees all egos pretty much. The ego has this belief it's a king. You want to own your moment. That's the ego, guys. It's an owner. It's as if it's as if the intelligence of your moment is a slave to the idea of you. But how the idea of you is kept, that requires your own search. You have to be an explorer of your lifetime. You have to just step back for a moment and see what it is. I have an uncle who is incredibly scientific and an atheist. And I remember him saying one word of interesting advice, and he told me that whenever there's an emergency, take one step back, look at the data, and then function. And what he said there kind of echoed in various ways for me, in various concepts. It was as if like the world happens, we are creatures where our biology is made in a reactive mode, pretty much. Like, think about it, like we were animals. Right now, like we are an advanced evolutionary kind of product, product of evolution. I've told, like, it's like you cannot deny evolution. Just, let me tell you the easiest way to prove, you can get proof for evolution. Just put the palms of your hands on the ground and you will understand the anatomy and the structure of the body, that we were four-limbed beings and we stepped on two. The biology of the human being was adapted to, in some sense, a four-limbed creature. But this four-limbed creature suddenly stood on its two legs, and that's where there was a divergent pattern. That's when it's as if we did something that even our biology didn't expect. This is why we find ourselves as animals with consciousness, where mystics have considered as the soul, which in some sense is a drop in an ocean, thinking it's a drop. You see, it's like we cannot avoid the understanding that we are standing under a limitless sky. This is why nobody can judge you, because what is their reference point? What is their measurement? As Alan Watts brilliantly says, it's like a philosophical, geometrical kind of question, where if two spheres are spinning around each other in empty space, which sphere is spinning around which? It is how direction was the evolutionary thing. Something directed the intelligence. Now, this direction could have been like a dormant seed that suddenly sprouted in the mind of the being, or it could have in some sense been the environment's influence. You see, this is why it's so fascinating. There's a version of history which most children find is boring, but when they truly look at history, they will just see unknown gaps, and those unknown gaps are what makes history exciting. What our species doesn't know makes it wonder about its progress. So knowledge has to calibrate, and if the educational systems don't do it, the individuals must. In the Lotus Sutra, a Buddhic text, there is an incredible quote. The quote says, "Keep your mind alive and free. The presence of the moment speaks through manifestation." You think visual reality is your world. No, it's how the unknown is communicating. So as you, at some point, wonder about a true independence from conceptual reality, you will eventually be introduced to your presence. Your presence is something cool. Let me tell you what it is. So right now I'm speaking to you. This person speaking, we can say I have a personality. Now this personality, I thought it was fixed. I thought it was like an Iron Man suit that never changed. For the consciousness. But then for the free will, it was a Iron Man suit for the free will, a subjective suit. And then I realized it changes every moment. This life is so fascinating. It's not that you cannot just hold on to objective reality for too long. You cannot hold on to subjective reality. Thoughts live and die much more quicker than people. This is why we have our minds can use the technology of language. There's a subtlety. We are not just what's in the space, we are the space as well. That's what the awareness is about. That's why the word mind is not an object. You can't put your mind on the table like it's an object. Your mind is the presence of conscious, wakeful intelligence. And it has various dimensions it's receiving the world from. The fact that we have senses, it's like our biology is even suggesting we're multidimensional. Why do we have a nose? Why do we have ears? Why do we have eyes? Why do we have limbs? In some sense, what the whole suggestion is one being has multiple ways it can apply itself or it can receive from the world. So the biology is like a scripture suggesting if there's multidimensional ways, there's a multidimensional way a single dimension can be kept. The ultimate single dimension, it is the unknown. People didn't have a word for the unknown. They called it God. It's usually whatever archetype they find in their culture. So when you go look at Christ never said God. He never used the word God. God was an evolution of the language. The archetype accessible to him was the Father. That means the Father is just like the mother is like a pillar for the child's kind of foundation. You see, so it was like a history, you know. It's as if I ask you for who you are, you know. Eventually, we will have to look at your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. You see, so the father was as if like the cause of the son, kind of like the. The source is a regression, and it's a sort of reverse engineering approach. Really, in life, you're either engineering phenomena or reverse engineering it. That means that's how the observance works. Pretty much throughout the day, things are entering my moment, and things are leaving my moment. And it's the same with subjective phenomena. For a time, it wasn't. I would react to my thoughts like like a bewildered person, you know. But like it. Then eventually you settle in and you kind of discriminate between the subjective realm. When you're no longer your thoughts, you actually attain a state of mind which is a kind of playfully like an omniscient witness of the moment. You're not shaped. You are like in the state of you're in like a liquid state, and you can choose to solidify through communication and an intention and attention a way of being manifest. Okay, so I consider the true nature of everybody to be attributeless. I consider the soul to be like the Patanjali Sutras very brilliantly say, like a glass orb moving around colored surfaces. The orb has no attributes, but wherever it goes, there is an attribute. Your free will and consciousness, where we can't touch, you know, which is just the texture or the quality of awareness. This awareness does not have an attribute. It's like glass. So it's like if you go in a bad environment, you're a bad person. Guess what? Guilt is automatically going to come. If you go in a good environment, you're a good person. Guess what? You're going to feel peaceful. You know, and so it's different, and voices of different environments entering our ear. You know, that is when you find the true freedom of your mind. When you rebel and rage against the voices that have been whispered to you since your childhood from the environment. You stand as a free moment, and that's when life gets the rhythmic intelligence of the greater percentage of your mind. Your intelligence evolves. It goes through a metamorphosis of being filtered through an individual idea to being a collective field of intelligence. So what's really brilliant is you get access to all of your senses as one moment, but before you had to be a certain idea which had access to limits of them. What I'm saying is internally there is a shift of attention, therefore a shift of conceptual stature. How you're composed as a thought to yourself changes literally, because you see you can't hold on to a thought, you know. No man can hold on to a thought. You know, this is the brilliant thing. I realize how hard I try to say the same thing every day. It will never be the same. Because every day is a new way the world is being painted. What I mean by that is that nature changes and I can't do anything about it. Therefore, you're playful with the inevitable. But at the same time, well, what you can do, you must do, or you're not living it well, you know? Because life, people think it has to have a mission, a purpose. This is why so many people, I feel, unauthentically are drawn to religion. Let me tell you why. Because they want their life to be simplified. They want to get an instruction and ta-da, it's easy, done. Let me tell you, I am not disregarding scripture. I am not disregarding revelation. I am simply saying the psychology of the human being is a reaction to the environment. And if the environment makes the free will feel that it has to be a certain thing, you will not give yourself permission internally. You have to find, kind of like how Lao Tzu would say, you have to let go of who you are now to become who you're meant to be. That's called evolution. And the winds of evolution push us all. The greatest effort towards an updated social consciousness for future generations is to realize future generations will be opening their eyes to a world that they will be trusting at first. What that means is the genius of the next wave of honest cultural engineers in our civilization will require them to try to realize that children, they open their eyes in their world trusting life. So there is an incredible ability to, in some sense, give the hardest problems of the world to the most honest beings of the world. This is why the educational system should be, it should change. Literally, it should flip over its head. What that means is, rather than children being taught, do you see? Children learn through teaching. Do you see? Imagine an educational system where it's as if how can I tell you? I want the assignments of all children in educational system before high school to bring the biggest global issues to their minds quickly. Children have a precision and speed of response because their minds are not filled with reference points of incapability. And so the rooms they will wake up in is the world that we leave behind. We have to evoke the spirit of exploration for clarity. Whoever you are, you seek clarity, you will be remembered not by books, but by your world. The world will realize there's someone authentically living for it. And in the Vedic context, playfully, the gods, in some sense, the gods gift the man. It's as if kind of like Hunger Games, you get sponsorships. Vedic mythology is honestly incredible. It's as if the East and the West are kind of like two students in a classroom fighting, and the global community is kind of like the instructor being like, okay, nations fighting with one another, why don't you all chill and we try to figure out how 8 billion beings can live in the most efficient, advanced way, where we have not just become an interstellar civilization, we have not just mastered the art of creating cities in our atmosphere, It's as if we start caring for the world and something strange happens. The world advances. And that is the only command of starlight left to follow. Stare at the unknown and march. With the sword and shield of your truth, of your honest vision, of a moment where you are not lying to yourself, even though the world could be. That's the kind of state of mind we need. That's the pilot of consciousness. That is the advanced communicator. These are terms that Mr. Within has brought to kind of suggest to people that you don't have to be lost in an idea. You are a navigation of your attention. The pilot of consciousness is not flying a plane. He is, but in some poetic way, the reason I chose that term is because the person, their attention is flying their plane of existence. You are navigating yourself as a moment of attention. Call it mind, soul, whatever you like, whatever image and story you can give to it, you just evoke that into more reality, It's so easy to give the steering wheel of what is real to the abstract, but you have to kind of develop your own style based on exposure to how you have studied your experience throughout your life. You might not realize it, but in every moment there are treasures that can be revealed when you just sit still and silent. Just trust me, just try it fast or near a tree or somewhere in nature, okay? If you care for what I'm saying, I recommend do it in nature, because there's something beautiful there, you know. And so as you do this, just sit still and silent. If you really are busy, do it for 10 minutes. If you can go at most, do it at max, do it for 20. You know, if you feel you want to go above 20, then you should, like, you choose wisely, you know. But what the whole point is, when you suddenly stop doing things in a world that's moving, you suddenly see all those movements at once. You access a multidimensional observance when you remain still and silent. That's a secret. It's not a secret, to be honest. It's just something people knew and it was forgotten. Yoga kind of is like trying to keep it alive. Thanks for tuning in, guys. In these talks, don't worry. I am conscious that I am kind of. It's as if it's a blank canvas, and I'm just slashing the canvas with various ideologies. But I'm kind of, at the same time, there is a picture I'm painting, and that picture is that the only thing left for the free will is to be responsible. And so once the person has mastered self, you have just been, it's like you know how to live on your own, then you care for how the world is living on its own. The whole civilization, you just care. The moment you care, you get access to the collective view. The moment you get access to the collective view, all your past and future senses of being, that kind of linear sense of time you have and relationship you have with your memory, it becomes a singular point. So what that means is you realize every moment you are generating the moment. And there comes an incredible kind of avalanche of creativity from your subconscious into the conscious. Just be fascinated by your own intelligence. This is what Mr. Within says. There's no longer a need for the external teacher. The best thing that the external teacher could ever be was a mirror. And that mirror would evoke the person's own vision. Your eyes, like you have, think of it this way. If you believe you're a thought, you have not seen your true eyes. That means don't be convinced by how you believe things right now. This is not it. Relax. And wonder about the authentic breath. They asked this mystic, who are you? He said, a moment in my breath. In yogic mystical practices, the breath was seen as divine. This biological body was seen as a sort of puzzle that could in some sense be some sort of Rubik's Cube that once aligned in a certain way, the world would be received in its clearest vision. And then a sort of evocation of an intuitive kind of like the logos, the inner guiding voice animates. It's kind of like, imagine if you were a photographer of exotic like animals and you were like in this kind of snowy mountain and like kind of looking at this cave with your camera trying to see this like snow mountain line come out or whatever, and imagine the snow mountain line comes out and you're just kind of like filming it. So in that moment, the way you're looking at that snow mountain line from the camera, that's a sort of observance that is required to have with the way your idea of your, like you have to have the same sort of scope with the idea of yourself. You become your own teacher because nobody has your eyes and nobody can in some sense move your inner realities unless your free will chooses to move. In Zen they have a saying, they say, when you want to climb a mountain, start at the top. And when I heard this, I honestly had, like, I wanted to burst out in laughter, but then I realized how important it is. What it means is that in a conscious waking moment, there is the opportunity to choose what ideological layout you want the world's meaning to be found in. That ideological layout, because it's the free will of your mind, instantly choose the greatest. That means if you want to be the greatest, already be it. If you want, that means your mind, just think about it. Do you think Beethoven, like when he was like at that peak of his like, you know, genius in playing the piano, you know, you think in that moment he doubted himself of his greatness when he was doing something that no one had ever did? You think Nikola Tesla, when he invented the AC motor, that moment, this dude, Nikola Tesla, he should be taught in schools, but he's not, you know? And his story is magnificent. He was some dude feeding pigeons, kind of writing notes, and like kind of this like inventor in his own room, you know. And so what happens is he suddenly gets the vision of the AC motor, right? And he runs to this, gets a stick and draws it in the dirt, as if he got the vision in an instant, and he had to immediately land that idea into manifestation. And so he drew it on the ground. You see, it's like in that moment, he did not doubt his genius because there was so much more. All those people doubting themselves, you don't get it. You don't have time to doubt yourself. There's so much more after you stop doubting yourself that the world has to happen. There is no end to greatness when we're in a changing world. That means, I mean, what else can we do? Honestly, it's like either we're atoms in space or we're humanity's last greatest advancement, you know? It's like, you know, what else? Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Care for your world and it will care for you, I believe. Much blessings and namaste.